Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining us this evening at The Real Truth of Running a Startup. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our esteemed panel over here. I appreciate you guys coming in this evening and joining us and talking about the real truth about what it's like to run a startup. So before we begin, I wanted to introduce India as part of Scale LA. We are so honored to be partnered with you on running this. So I know you had a few words that you wanted to say, so do you want to come up?
Hi everyone, thank you so much for being here tonight. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us on the 10th floor, so thank you for that, first and foremost. Just to get right into it, before I tell you a little bit about Scale LA, I first just have to thank Sophia for putting together this incredible panel on this topic, and it's so relevant for us and our startup, so thank you for the work that you've done to support the community as well. Thank you for being here. Also, need to give a huge shout out and thank you to First Republic Bank for sponsoring this evening. All of the food and drinks is thanks to them, so thank you guys for your contribution as well. Really quickly, just a quick statement about Scale LA, so you've got some context as to why you're all here in our building tonight. Scale LA, our goal is to make Los Angeles the next hub of healthcare innovation. We built out this space, the 10th floor, which we're at now. Early January, we opened our doors to provide resources to support healthcare startups in the local area that are trying to build innovation to improve the mind, body, and soul of people in our community. If you at all are in the healthcare industry or are interested in joining our community, would love to get you looped in and see how you can participate in some of the incredible things that we've got going on in the startup world. So if you're interested in learning more, please feel free to chat with me as well as our other team members, Taylor in the back, as well as David over there grabbing a slice of pizza. We would love to get you up to speed on what we have going on and get you guys a part of the community. So thank you for being here tonight.
And now we actually have a few words from Robert and Jocelyn from First Republic. First, actually, before you get up, I wanted to say, please step back down, yeah. I am actually a customer of First Republic Bank, and they have been so helpful in getting things going and being so supportive, and I thank you guys so much, because there's been a lot of me running around between Toronto and Los Angeles, and you guys have been so supportive, and thank you so much for sponsoring today. I really appreciate it. Go.
Good evening. Thank you guys for allowing us to be a part of this event. This is Jocelyn. My name is Robert King. We work for First Republic. We have an amazing platform for startup and tech space. We love founders. So we would love to meet you guys, understand your guys' business, and see how we can add value to your company.
So just briefly, just what VidaCher does, essentially we tell stories for brands and people. We are actually platform agnostic. We tell stories on the best platform possible, so whether that is through pitch decks or websites or brand identity or paid social, we can take care of all of it. So if you have any questions about that, we are happy to help you. If there's any traction that you're looking for with regards to your startup, we are happy to help you do that. So before I get the panelists to introduce themselves, I wanted to sort of briefly explain why I wanted to put this series together. So last year for me was one of the most difficult professionally. I had broken 2 of my fingers, so I was in therapy for the first half of the year. And my co-founder, she had been away from the company for about a year and a half because she had colon cancer, and we found out that it had returned in April of last year. So I had to make some really hard pivots in the company and decide what I wanted to do. And it really took its toll by the time that I had hit November, and actually October, beginning of October. And I had a sciatic nerve issue. Thankfully I'm okay, but I definitely was bedridden for a couple of weeks. And I found that, I had a really supportive family and friends and everyone, but I found that I wish that I had an opportunity to maybe think about things ahead of time so that I wasn't in a position where I was really stressed out by the time that I hit the end of the year. So I'm hoping that today that we get some answers for those of us who are founders as to how to sort of deal with some of the issues that come up. And if you have any questions or anything that you're sort of dealing with, please feel free to ask the panelists, or we're going to have a Q&A at the end. But please put your questions forward. And those of you who have been so lovely and giving me some of your questions that I'm going to be asking today, thank you so much for contributing those questions. But there's other people who probably have the same questions, so please feel free to speak up. So thank you. Thank you guys for joining us. Okay, so without further ado, I will get our panelists to introduce themselves.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Nick Sewell. I'm the faceless one on the flyer. I'm really glad to be here today, kind of share my experience with you, as well as the amazing people I'm sitting next to.
My name is Jay Goss, and I'm the general partner of a venture fund based in Pasadena. We also have an office in Santa Monica, and interestingly, an office in Singapore. We're a seed stage venture capital fund, only focused on healthcare, with starting with a pretty liberal definition of healthcare. So we look at just about anything if it has any connection to broken fingers or anything at all related to healthcare. We'll look at minus. We don't do biotech, so we kind of extract that out of our definition, anything that's left. And for the sake of the title of the event, The Real Truth About Running a Startup, prior to the fund, which in essence is a startup, we came online a year ago. We've invested in 21 healthcare companies, 9 of which have been in Southern California and 11 of which have been elsewhere. I was involved in 33 different early stage companies. Kind of thinking of the fund as my 34th startup, so I can also perhaps talk about some of the things that are on your mind, having nothing to do with venture capital.
Nice. My name is Jean-Michel, GM for short. So I'm an entrepreneur myself, angel investor, mentor at USC. I'm a scout for 2 venture funds. And I think the reason why Sophia invited me to this panel is that as an entrepreneur, I believe I've made every mistake possible a founder can make, and I failed. Every possible failure, I have made them. And I've also been an operator in some really harsh situation. Like I've been a crisis CEO. I took a company from bankruptcy all the way to an exit. And my title here is Startup Advisor, and that's just one thing that I do. But I think that's why I consider myself a valuable startup advisor. Is as an operator, I've experienced everything, mostly the worst, and I try to make sure that the founders I work with don't follow my steps.
Hi, I'm Nicole Threlko. I'm a senior attorney at Manning & Cass, and I work with our business litigation team. We represent businesses ranging from small startups to large corporations, starting with business formation through winding up and all of the transactional and litigation needs in between. I think Sophia asked me to be on this panel. We actually met at a fundraiser called the Walk on Water, where we were both volunteering and randomly talking. I think I was discussing a client of mine and their business aspects, and she was telling me about what she just mentioned to all of you, and we just decided this would be a good fit, but happy to be here.
Thank you guys so much. I'm so delighted to be on this panel with you guys and ask you all the tough questions. Okay, so the first question that I have for you guys is, okay, so, I've seen some really great pitches, but I'm just wondering, when you are seeing these pitches, what's kind of going through your mind? What are you looking for? That's sort of the first part of that question. And then the second part of it is, for Nicole and Nick, what do you see, what does it take for, when you see a team, how do you know they're gonna make it? How do you know that this is you're like, yeah, this is just definitely something special?
I think for that, you are investing in the person, not necessarily the idea, because so many ideas start and they fail, but it's the person and their drive and tenacity and the people that they're working with that really help the business start to grow.
Is this thing on? All right. I'm just checking. So I think for me, there's a couple things I look for. One, I'm looking to see how well people communicate. And I'm looking to see how well people communicate to each other, not about what they're working on, as crazy as that sounds. Because when things are working, everyone's happy. You find out the resources you need, but it's really when things fall to complete shit that you're having the most difficult time. And so I tend to view, personal relationships the same way as I do business relationships. And so I'm looking for companies that can communicate in crisis. Because that's when everything's on the line. That's when the true you is gonna show up and not like, oh yeah, we've got funding or this thing just happened. Like, that's all performative to me. And so for me, it really does matter how well people communicate in crisis. And I can't stress that enough because, there's tons of companies that start out really well with great ideas, but they have such horrible communication. They can't, they don't understand what their clients are saying. They don't understand each other. And on top of that, then you toss on personal life, right? And we all have real lives outside of our spaces that we work in. So I think for me, it's really about, how people really can sort of communicate what their needs are and how they need support.
So I think the essence of the question is, I don't think if you Google what do investors look for, especially early stage investing, ever you get a list where number 1, 2, or 3 is not the team. I mean, it's always, you hear that over and over and over with people like us with a microphone in front of our hands and every list you ever find on the internet. One of the interesting ways to sort of think about this if you're starting a company and you're trying to make an impression on investors is a lot of times the one co-founder meeting with me can do a pretty good job, even kind of fake me out, because oftentimes co-founders or founders are pretty charismatic people. But one of the things to think about in terms of the implicit competition that you're in when you're meeting with investors is getting, if there's 3 co-founders, getting 3 co-founders at the table with the investor. It's a lot harder to think about kind of the dynamics. It's a lot harder for 3 people to fake me out. They have to really be in a zone. And so when I see 3 people who are like able to complete each other's sentences, you can tell they work really well together. They could still be faking me out, but odds are less that they're doing that. So it's just kind of something to think about. If you're a solo founder, this doesn't work. It's you and you alone talking to me. But if it's you and there are a couple other people on the team that have co-founder status and they've been with you since the beginning, bring them to the pitch meetings. I mean, assuming they can complete a sentence and tuck in their shirt and all those good things, bring them to the meeting because I am sort of speaking on behalf of investors, will be impressed with the chemistry of the team, and will also observe that it's just like I said, it's harder to fake me out 3-on-1 than it is 1-on-1.
Well, I guess one thing that I want to add is, like you don't find all the answers in one pitch, right? So I think my answer. So I've been luckier as an investor and as an operator. To me, the answer is time. Spend a lot of time with the founders. I mean, it's maybe my own, methodology that I have developed, but I will spend, weeks, like digging into, a founder. So the business that's fairly easy, but really, like that person, you don't get a sense if someone has integrity, resilience. I mean, those qualities that really are like recurring in every founder. If you don't spend like weeks and weeks, I mean, really, for me, it's weeks at a time in different situations. So I'll go to an investor meeting. I'll go to see them pitch publicly. I'll go, in different contexts. And I think it's only after that time, that amount of time, that those qualities are really distilled and confirmed. But I think the first time you meet a founder, like a true founder, entrepreneur, there is some level of intuition, like you can recognize it. I mean, I'm sure it's the same for you. It's almost a pattern, like you recognize it in someone, but it needs to be confirmed and validated, and that takes time.
So along those lines, there's a few people who are starting to scale up now, and it's trying to find those sort of right partners. How do we do that? How do we look for the right partners? And what I mean by partners is whether that's investors, whether that's advisors, whether that's employees. How do we do that?
Well, I think my answer, taking off the VC hat, but all the other startups, and it's a counterintuitive answer. If you're really good, like it's almost like interviewing, right? If you think you're a great interviewer, then there's probably an answer to the question. But it's almost like self-selection. I've never felt like when I was on the startup side, I never felt like I was particularly good at interviewing a potential strategic partner or co-founder. So I actually did the opposite and just assumed that I'll bring 6 people in. I only need 4, but 2 will fizzle out. And in essence, don't try to overthink it. It's a different way of approaching this, but it just never, to overthink it and to spend too much time, you have so little time when you're doing a startup in the first place, it's almost easier to say, I need 2 people to do corporate development. I'll find 4, and whoever's left standing in 2 months are the 2 people I want to go with. And as long as you don't do anything crazy with equity or anything crazy with any of the economics associated with it, then it becomes survival of the fittest, and the 2 that are there at the end are the 2 you go with. Otherwise, you have to just assume you're a great evaluator of talent, and if you have that skill, I think you do it that way. But if you're being more realistic / you don't have that skill, go the other route and just don't overthink it.
Well, I guess the question depends. I mean, are we talking about an investor, an advisor, or co-founder? Because the answer is vastly different, right? You can't get rid of a co-founder, or it's difficult to get rid of a co-founder. You can. I mean, yes. I'll let you. No, so I mean, really, the answer depends on, are we talking about an employee or co-founder? To me, really, again, like the answer, let me answer quickly. The answer, again, there is time. I mean, like, don't rush into any relationship. I mean, truly, I mean, especially, I mean, like, the more strategic the relationship is, that person is. I mean, if you think about a co-founder, I mean, don't get in bed with someone you don't know. I mean, as a co-founder, I mean, I'm starting a new company right now. I've known the 2 other founders for 8 years, and we've worked in 2 companies prior. And, I wouldn't do it otherwise, because I've had the bad co-founder experience.
So, but I mean, for people who are sort of looking to bring on new talent, I really like Jay's approach. Is there anything that you would recommend as far as like how do we do that? How do we know that if we're trying to scale up our team? How do we do that?
Again, I think it's really hard to answer. Like, are we talking about an early stage company, a company that scales really fast and hard? I mean,
let's say that's the example. Yes.
Company that scales fast and hard.
Yep.
I think, like, again, a mistake is to, like, rush hiring. I mean, there's a rule that says if you start hiring B people, you'll end up with only, like, C-level people, versus, like, A+ talent. I'm going to say, again, the answer is time. I mean, if you have a company that scales very, very fast and you bring, like, average talent, it's going to crater very fast, right? So, yeah, I mean, and also I think it's recognizing, are you a good are you a good person at hiring or not? And if you're not, then outsource it.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so the next questions that I want to talk about also is like getting in front of you, the 2 of you. How does someone do that? And as you sort of mentioned, Jan, like it takes time to do that. But how do we get in front of you? Like, is there a way that we can develop a relationship with you so that we can have that time? And how do we do that?
Well, so I have a newish answer to that question, which I get a lot. It's actually the same answer, but it's for a different reason. And you all are doing it, and it means coming to events like this. But I've come to realize, now that I'm on the other side of the fence, that, and I'm painfully aware of this, we aren't consistently receptive. So we have a fund and it's got X millions of dollars in it, and we have to deploy that capital over, let's say, 3 years. But some months I have a ton of great companies that I'm kind of in the red zone with, and I'm doing final due diligence, and I'm about to cut a check, and other months I'm hungry. But if you think about, like, spend just a second thinking about it from our perspective, I wouldn't be here if I was on the last couple months of my fund. Like, if I'm not a hungry venture capitalist, I'll blow off your invitation to be at this panel, because I'm not looking for more deal flow. So one place to find VCs that, all things equal, are a little hungrier in wherever they are in their fund life is events like this, because there's plenty of us. But you could go talk to the guys at, you go find the guys at Crosscut, and they might just be loaded up right now, and there's no way to know that. You can go to Crunchbase and you can find out how big their fund is, but what you don't know is, are they overwhelmed with good deals right now, or are they hungry for good deals? And kind of all things equal, they'll be at events like this if they're hungry again, and they won't be at events like this if they're not. So coming to events, you get to meet me, but I wouldn't be here if I was not capable of writing another check for the next few months. I just wouldn't. So you kind of kill two birds with one stone by being at these networking events, because we just won't be here if our fund is good.
Well, I guess I'm going to answer, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, I mean, if I want to meet someone, I'm relentless. I'm doing it today. I mean, I will email someone 6 times, 7 times, 12 times. I mean, I will get an answer, even if it's a no. I'm serious. Like, if you give up after 2 or 3 trials, you're not cut for it, I mean, you and I met at an event, Sofia. We kept talking. There was, this was not on the table. I answer everyone that emails me. Like, really, people, I'm submerged, and I'm sure you are on LinkedIn. I answer mostly no, but I answer to everyone that emails me. And the reason why I do it is because I'm very often the one who cold emailed someone, and I don't let them go. That's the only, really, that's the only way to do it.
Well, thank you for answering yes. Okay, so I wanted to sort of talk to you guys individually a little bit. So, Nick, I wanted to ask you a question about some companies that you like right now and what they're doing.
Oh, God. I'll take that one. Jesus. My interest in advising for companies is sort of spread broad. There are a couple ed tech companies that are popping up. I'm really interested in. Let me just say this: I don't have an allegiance to any one particular field. That's just me. I'm someone I like variety. I know and I trust myself. So if there's a company that I'm interested in, I'll go after them. But more specifically, there's a couple ed tech companies that are actually quite nameless, and they really are nameless at this point. They're literally working their shit out. And there are actually a few service-based companies in the digital media space that's really focused on sort of restructuring and telling new narratives, but through a place of like policy and advocacy. I think there's no shortage of startup companies that are in the media and digital space, but I think to tell stories from a different industry, that's something that's really interesting me right now.
Is there anything that's particular about certain companies that you think that you feel like that's what success looks like? There's like that certain element that you're like, okay, that's what each company should have. Is there some kind of pattern?
My response to that is kind of twofold. So I'm also an entrepreneur, but I'm also on the advising side. So a lot of my instincts from that certainly on the advising side come from being an entrepreneur. And so I think. And I say that, and the reason why I have to overthink about it is because I think typically, when you think about someone an entrepreneur versus an advisor, you sort of think of two different perspectives. But I think when you're somebody who holds both perspectives, you really do try and get down to the nitty gritty of it. And I think it's a mashup, actually, to be honest with you. So like for example, one of the tech companies, digital media companies that I'm interested in, they are not only are they interested in telling stories from companies and people that typically don't have a platform, it's their aggressiveness about making sure that they use these other platforms to sort of amplify these stories. And so I think it's really about their process that I'm really interested in the most. But I gotta just say, I'm also like a weird brainiac. So the things that most people don't find interesting, I actually find interesting because I can also become a systems thinker. And so for me, I understand how that serves later down the line. So.
Interesting. So Nicole, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what happens when you're not getting along with your co-founder or something happens. Because I know that for me, when I needed to start revisiting the partnership agreement that I had with my partner, the lawyers that I talked to were like, this is Frankenstein and is like just garbage. So what can we do so that when something happens, we're not in a position where the lawyer's basically laughing at my agreement?
Huh. I'm assuming when you said this is Frankenstein that you were referring to your operating agreement, right? That
Yes.
delineates everything that's going to happen with your organization. So when I get new clients, I send out an intake questionnaire, and it has anywhere from 30 to 45, 60 questions, depending on what you tell me during our initial conversation. And the point of that is you're filling it out. One, you don't have to pay me to get every single answer from you because you'll just fill it out. And it's to get you to ponder all of these questions, like what happens after the initial contributions and we need more money? Where's that going to come from? How is sweat equity attributed into this? What happens if we no longer get along? What happens if we are two founders and we can't agree on something in the process of this? What's the tiebreaker? And so by having, I learned in law school, proper preparation prevents poor performance, right? So you need to have all of this spelled out. When we're friends, when everybody's getting along, that is the perfect time to decide what you're gonna do when you hate each other. Not that every business is going to fail, but there comes a time everybody has disagreements, we're only human. And so if you have that spelled out, you've got your expectation management right from the start, and you can refer back to the contract. And so as a lawyer, when I get an agreement that really delineates all of this stuff, it makes me smile. Because I'm like, oh, this is what's going to happen. And if you don't like it, well, you signed this when you were in a good mood. So this is where we go with this. If you want your founder out of the organization, most agreements should include something called a buyout agreement. And that delineates exactly how your business is going to be valued when you get out, who can buy who out. What if, I believe you said your partner got sick, right? So what if your partner gets sick and passes away? Are you all of a sudden dealing with that partner's spouse that has inherited the business? So it delineates all of this. So I think you really need to speak to an attorney at the beginning. I know nobody likes to hear that, especially startups, because you don't have a lot of money at the beginning. It doesn't cost too much to get an operating agreement, and we do so many of them that we can get them out relatively quickly. The questionnaire allows you to think about everything that you need to ahead of time and bring it to us so we can just put it in writing for you and you've got this set in stone.
So I wanted to ask about what happens when we decide to go on the internet and pick up a template.
Well, templates aren't personalized, right? If you're smart, you're driven, right? You're starting businesses, so a lot of you could probably read through those templates and pick things that you may or may not need. But the point is, you're not necessarily thinking about every aspect. And a lot of people looking at templates aren't thinking about what's happening when the business is going south, aren't thinking about how are profits and losses going to be distributed amongst the partners when that comes up. So there's all these little nuances that if you just grab a template and whether or not you read it, it just might not be exactly what you guys want, the percentage ownership that you're going to split up. So I don't agree with them. I don't know many templates that have buyout agreements in them. Trying to think. Bad things happen with templates. You need a human body to help you through this process.
Yeah.
You know, so I think all the times that I've sat out there and you said that, at least early in my career, I would have thought, yeah, I don't need it. But unless I'm really good at finding dysfunctional co-founders, I can say that across 33 companies, like, on one hand, can I count the times that that doesn't come in handy? So like 27 or 28 of my companies at least had a flare-up, if not a full-on explosion of the co-founders. So it just for sure happens. And you guys are kind of an N of one, and you're all just looking at your own perspective, but it happens.
Yep.
You know it happens. I know it happens 28 or 33 times, and nobody thinks it's going to happen. It's kind of the prenup thing. But if you think about all the things you should invest in, it's like crazy to shortchange that piece of it. It's 5, 10, or it's 5K or 10K, whatever it's going to cost you. What could possibly be smarter than to get that handled at the beginning? It's just super sensible.
And it's exponentially more expensive on the back end if you don't have it properly handled. Yeah.
More than
Jan, do you have some stories to share? Some
Yeah,
horror stories?
Co-founder fallout. Yeah, I went through it. Co-founders trying to kick me out of my company. Lawyering up. So yes, I've done it once. I won't do it again. Yeah.
I definitely learned my lesson as well. So I wanted to get into, and Nicole, let's start with you and then work backwards on the panel. Dealing with IP. What do we do when there's someone who has stolen it or is trying to steal it? How do we protect ourselves from that? And then the second part of that question is for you guys is, how do we know who we should be talking to and what kind of information we should be revealing? Let's start with you, Nicole.
So this gets back to everything that we would discuss at the beginning, what you need to have trademarked and copywritten or patented. If we know this from the outset, we can get that process going, because in order to protect it, or in order to deal with it if someone steals it, you have to have it protected in the beginning. And then from that point, if somebody does, let's say, use your copyright, prior to filing a lawsuit, which does get very expensive, we send a cease and desist. Because a lot of times somebody will use your copyright or your trademark and not necessarily think that they're stealing, not realize that the context in which they're using it, they can't be using it. So you really want to make sure it's protected first, and then come to me. We'll do a cease and desist letter. If that doesn't work, then usually the next steps are lawsuits.
I don't have experience in that matter, thankfully.
Have you ever chatted with somebody and then you reveal too much and then suddenly my case ends up on someone's blog post?
No, I've been asked to sign NDAs and never sign them. So
Why?
yeah, that's just a rule of mine. I don't think I'll work with a founder who puts an NDA. Unless we're talking about a biotech, something that's very, very specific, maybe like hard tech. But other than that, I just think it's a strange way to start a relationship. And if you're not capable of articulating your company in a pitch or in a meeting or in a setting like this with protecting your IP, then go find another job. Really. So yes, NDA, I won't sign them. Never. So yeah, I don't have more experience than this.
Well, how do we know who we should be talking to? How do we know that talking to you doesn't mean that we're going to end up?
So I think the rule is that you have to be paranoid. As a founder, and I tell that to every founder I work with. Even if you don't have defensible technology, even if it's maybe just like a business process that you're optimizing, be paranoid. That means how are your devices managed? Your documents. You have to be paranoid if you want to be a successful founder. That's
And where is that line between being paranoid and then not talking to anybody about anything? How do we know where who to talk to and who not to talk to and what to say?
I would defer to Nicole. Exactly.
I suggest NDAs.
Interesting.
Well, all venture capitalists, nearly all professional investors won't sign an NDA. So it's good for a lot of other fields, but we can't because I'll see 3 companies the same day that are almost the same thing, and I'm not going out of my way to share, but the 3 companies are all the Uber of physical therapists, and they just kind of start to all blend together. So we see if we're professional investors, as differentiated maybe from an angel investor, we're seeing so much that it would be disingenuous for us to sign NDAs. But the broader question for just being paranoid or not, and not specific to being paranoid about a potential investor versus being paranoid with a potential investor or a potential employee or a current employee, just has to do with how important IP is. It's kind of an obvious answer, but there's businesses where where IP doesn't matter at all, and then in my experience, there's businesses where it doesn't matter at all. There's businesses where you'll kind of superficially get a provisional patent so that you can check a box that some VCs want checked. And then there's businesses that the intellectual property is really the thing, and that's going to drive almost everything you do there on out. You just have to decide which kind of business you're looking to be. And there's no right or wrong between category 1, category 2, and category 3, but give it some thought. And if you're in category 3 and it's all about the IP, then have the greatest IP. Don't cut any corners on that. Get a great IP lawyer, get as many patents filed, have a whole kind of IP patent platform strategy where you're just getting a broad set of patents around your core technology, and go all in. But don't do that if your business in the ultimate valuation is more around execution, and I would say 90x% that's the case, then don't kill yourself on it, because that's not how you're going to win or lose. You're going to win or lose based on your ability to execute.
I actually will share, I definitely have an experience in this. So as an entrepreneur, my first 2 companies, I was managing talent in the music and film industry. So this was before we had one like our first Grammy and hit the Billboard chart and all those interesting things. So one of my clients was a songwriter. We wrote this amazing song, and when I was managing entertainment talent, the first thing I would say is, did you protect your art? That's the very first thing I always say, because I think unlike a technology space, in entertainment spaces, there is a lot of camaraderie. There's lots of studio sessions. There's a lot of time sharing your ideas, your thoughts, your songs, your content. And so me and my client at the time, we had this very long conversation about protecting art. And even though we protected our art, and it went to be released through a major record label, they did not clear a speech of Martin Luther King. So then we had to go through this whole issue with having to pull the record back off of the shelves. It was a really big, sloppy fucking mess. And in that moment, it made me realize just how important it is to protect your art. And so to jump on the other side, years later, as someone who works with companies, I still take that same approach. Is, well, before you talk to me, and I think we are in a space that so many people are paranoid in a way that doesn't serve versus being protective and hypervigilant. I always ask people before we talk, is this protected? And I'm asking not necessarily for me, but for them, right? And so sometimes people say, yes, this is, or I don't know, who should I be talking to? And my next thing is, you need to find yourself a lawyer. Do you recommend someone? I can recommend somebody, but do you know somebody within your own network? And that's kind of how I start my relationships. But to kind of finish off the story after the record label, needless to say, things were solved. There was a huge lawsuit in the process. It was painful, and even though again my client's work was protected because we were part of the project, we were very, very close to being involved in a lawsuit. I've had other clients who've done other work, and again, you have some people who are paranoid, and have another client did another song for a different album for Disney actually, and I can't say their name, but a really known artist who did not actually write the song that she wanted to sue my company for. And so I thought that, well, I was like, you can't sue me if you didn't write the song, and it got really, really messy. And so I think I've been on all different sorts of sides of it, and that was a pretty big, crazy kind of happening, especially as a first-time entrepreneur back then. But I think always protecting your art, your craft, whatever it is. And I think, and yeah, I understand to be paranoid, but I think at the same time, you've got to trust yourself. That's kind of what it comes down to. If you don't trust yourself enough to talk about, the company that you're building to someone who you feel that you may want to enter into a relationship, then you probably shouldn't talk about it at all. And if you probably shouldn't talk about it at all, then maybe you shouldn't be doing it. Because at some point, you're going to have to take a risk. Because again, like Jean-Michel said, it's very rare that you find, Jay said, it's very rare that you find a company that's actually producing something new versus something that's already been produced.
So now let's talk about what happens when you run out of money.
Go home.
So, like, what is some advice that you guys have for, how far out should we be thinking about this? What do we do when it happens? How can we sort of avoid a lot of that stress that happens when this eventually happens to all of us?
I'll chime in and say, hopefully your operating agreement planned for this. Because you can and you should be able to say who's going to be contributing sweat equity, if you need more capital, where that's going to come from. So again, preparation prevents poor performance. Like, get it out, get it discussed in the beginning, because when money starts to become an issue is when you start to fight. I've seen in the past anyway. So if you guys have it spelled out and you know exactly where it's coming from, it's not as much of an issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the right way to look at it. I mean, so one of the the first company that I co-founded, I came back to, that was entering bankruptcy proceedings. So I decided to take a chance and try and turn it around. My first conversation was with a lawyer and asking the question, why can I cut? And what is it that I can cut and what is it I can't cut, right? Because I didn't want to create some new liabilities. Once that conversation was over, I cut absolutely everything. But, I didn't have any, so, no one could sue me. No past employees, current employees. I mean, so I think that, so if you have a company that runs out of money, I mean, yes, the first conversation I would have would be with a lawyer. I mean, so looking at the agreement, but then the operating agreement, but then with a lawyer and asking, okay, what is it that I can cut? Can I convert maybe like full-time employees into contractor? And what can I ask? So I would be very, very careful about some of those cuts. Other than that, I mean, if we're really talking about desperate situation, so let's talk about mine. I mean, I reduced, runway from, over 200K to less than 30K a month in 3 weeks. That was brutal. So that means, firing everyone. That means sometimes not paying people, but, providers. I mean, really, you have to make a lot of tough decisions. I mean, it's, refocus the company. It's maybe like focusing on one metric only to get traction on this and get new funding. It's, abandoning 5 projects and focusing on only one. I mean, every situation is very different, but I would say that if that situation happens, you have to make some very, very hard decisions very fast. Not be emotional or sentimental about it. Yeah, I'd say that's the way to do it.
Yeah, so I agree that's the way to do it, but my answer is more cavalier. You can't run out of money. Like, if you're the CEO of a company, you can't run out of money. Like, that's your first, second, third, fourth, fifth, all the way down to 10th thing. Everybody else can worry about everything else in the company, but you can't run out of money. And you can't run out of money if you're a growth company, because all of the things that you just suggested, you will have to do, and that just makes you wildly unattractive to investors. I'm going to love your concept. I'm going to love the little bit of traction you have. I'm going to love the business model. And then we're going to get into why everything's been throttled back and how you've lost momentum, and 2 of your 3 co-founders have jumped ship, and 3 people that are on your payroll, their spouses are pissed off at you, and just on and on and on. And you have to be so good to get me to write a check at that point because remember, it's still just Shark Tank or American Idol. It's still just a competition of every other company that I'm looking at, and some other company's gonna be just as good as you, but they're not gonna have all that baggage right now. So I just look at that as you can't run out of money. You just like that's your only mindset. If you're the CEO founder, that's your one thing. Never let that happen. Of course, it's easy for me to say with a microphone in my hand because it does happen. It's happened to many of my companies. But the better question is how do you make sure that never happens? Not what to do when it does happen, because it just can't happen. Just so many things, so many bad dominoes start to fall the minute that happens.
Just out of curiosity, show of hands, how many people in here are founders that have a team that's, yourself plus 3? All right. How about any solo entrepreneurs in here? Okay. So for you solo entrepreneurs, I want to answer specifically for you. And this is assuming that some of you are solo entrepreneurs and you may not even be at the point where you need seed funding. If you're at a point where even if you've raised funding, family or friends, and you don't, or best friends, or however you have, or maybe you saved before you quit your previous job, whatever the case is. I think something that's very, very practical for those of you. I think when you hit that point and the account is 0 or whatever, 0 may be $300. For others of you it may be $6,000. I don't know what your 0 is, but my practical advice to you is when you hit that, more than likely 2 things are going to happen. You're probably going to be really pissed, but still passionate. And 2, you're probably going to be really fucking frustrated, right? So then you're in an emotional position of, this is something I believed in for so long, considering however long you've worked on this project or idea. But at the same time, you're still questioning yourself as to, do I keep going? And if so, what do I do, right? And so my practical advice to you is that more than likely your passion will decline some because you haven't reached the mark that you want. However, I would also say be passionate, but set a realistic goal. So it may be, hey, you're a solo entrepreneur. You may have, your own internal runway of like another 4 months, or maybe for you it's like another 6 weeks, or maybe it's another year, whatever that is. But you have to be passionate, but set that line. And when you reach that, if you're not financially able to rebound, call it quits. Simple. Because I've been there. I've learned more from my mistakes than I have my successes. Jesus Christ, have mercy, I can write a book. And I say that because I've been there. I've been there when I haven't been able to get funding because of, all sorts of like real life societal issues, right? So I've had to like bootstrap and like find money and get friends and do all these things. And it's been companies I've been super passionate about. But I'm like, shit, I'm out of funding. I am like pulling my hair out, even though we're being all the time. But when is that line? When do I say no? And I think it's really difficult when you are passionate. You've been spending so much time. You've been over-invested. And so I think, I had, after my 3rd try, I got to a point where I was like, look, 6 months, regardless of what I think, I want to do, however optimistic I am, if I do not reach this goal by 6 months, done. And I gotta be honest, I got to that point 6 months and I had $0, and I felt peace about it. So that's more practical advice for people who may not have the actual funding.
So let's get into what happens from a regular standpoint in terms of burnout and just being completely stressed out from running this venture. One, I guess the question is, what's your advice for when it starts to happen, when it happens, and what should we do to sort of recover from that?
Well, I have not started a startup, but I represent a lot of them. But I am a lawyer, so I suffer from burnout almost on the daily. I do yoga, I run, I play with my dog, I connect with family members and friends, and I really take me time because my life, I spend at least anywhere from 10 to 12 hours a day working. Startups, you guys are probably spending closer to 16 and sleeping in what little time that you have. And you really just need to try and take, from my perspective, You need to take time for me because if you don't step back and realize what got you into this mess, that whatever you're dealing with and the stress that you're dealing with is gonna speed up your burnout. And you guys, you have the drive and you want to keep going, so just relax, give yourself a break, and go for a run.
I mean, I really have no good lesson on that. I mean, I think that, so there's two things, right? There's the emotional burnout, maybe, and the physical one. Physically, it will happen. I mean, you will get, really, you will get physically burnout. Emotional burnout, I think that the danger there is that, it maybe creates some like mental fog, and you might not be able to make the right decisions, so honestly, I mean, so this is going to be my answer. My answer is like find a good partner in life. Whatever that partner is, whatever that partnership is, and however shape it is. But and I think, by that, I do mean a partner that understands the challenges of running a company. Being an entrepreneur, it's it's a special breed of people. Really, like entrepreneurs can only be entrepreneurs, I believe. I think you do need some understanding of what an entrepreneur, what running a business means, like how much your identity is tied to that business, and the success of the business is your own success. I used to work at Microsoft, when Microsoft stocks went up and down, it didn't affect my morale. When I worked for, Crowdfunder, my company that, the company that I co-founded, when it was close to bankruptcy, I was depressed. Really, I was not depressed because I didn't have time, but, I was, no, but really, it affected me emotionally, right? So I think you need to find a partner that really understands that, the emotional weight that that being an entrepreneur, comes with. That has worked for me.
So when I think about burnout and I think about your question, it occurs to me that almost never do you burn out, no matter how hard you're working, if things are going well in your company. Right? Things are going well, that's the drug that gets you to do the 16 hours and work all weekend. So for my last answer, I would just say, just succeed because then you won't burn out. But we already got that well once. But some practical advice that I've been given, and I think it's one thing you can do that can help, because the burnout comes from things aren't going well, and then there's some financial pressure. And so, I've heard people talk about try to lower your own, like your personal burn rate. If you're going to go into a startup, and I had this experience once, and I younger, 27 or something, and had the nice SUV. For whatever reason, and I guess I almost anticipated the burnout, decided to turn in the SUV and get kind of the shitty car. And it was like, it wasn't at all going to make a difference, but psychologically I was like, oh, I just saved like $300 a month, so I can spend $30,000 a month more on this company without getting that pressure and that burnout. So it's just one small piece of practical advice, but if you can lower your life personal burn, then the pressure that's bound to happen at some point during the company isn't going to feel as horrible on your shoulders, and maybe you have moderate burnout instead of massive burnout because you've gotten your life down. Instead of needing $10,000 a month to cover all your fixed personal expenses, you only need $6,000 a month. And there are things you can do that you maybe should do if you're about to do a startup, and you can almost predict that somewhere in those first 2 or 3 or 4 years, because the burnout you're talking about, it's not, oh God, I've been working for IBM for 30 years and I'm burning out. This is all short duration stuff, and the burnout comes because you're killing yourself and you're not quite seeing the financial success around the corner. I would say that's the number one impetus for the burnout.
So my advice for what to do, I think a couple things. So I want to back this train up. I think first off, you kind of need to know yourself, right? Because I think I'm not for sure, I'm assuming maybe you guys are first-time entrepreneurs, maybe you're not. But I always tell people that being an entrepreneur is very much like growing a new appendage. Like it's something that you can't conceive Because you're literally, most times, sometimes, you're building something that doesn't exist, right? And I think part of it, you're developing either a service or product, but then your relationship with yourself is shifting, whether you realize that or not. And I think lots of startups, lots of founders, they go and they're really excited. Oh my God, I'm gonna be my own boss, and they're all over the place. And then like the reality of an entrepreneur hits, and you're like, I'm distracted today, or like I didn't understand how to do this, or I didn't realize I need to spend, like why am I spending so much time on like social media, doing all of these sorts of things, right? And that's just sort of the learning curve of becoming an entrepreneur. But I think when you get to that point where you feel like, shit, I think I really need a break, or maybe I need to put this down. I think if you know yourself well enough, or if you're on that process, because I mean, at the same time you're building your business, you're also building yourself too. And so to think that you're not is completely delusional, let me just tell you. And so I think you need to take a break. I think it's just that, take a break. And I mean, your break doesn't have to be 6 months or 3 weeks. It could just simply be, I'm gonna take a week off and really like check in with somebody. And I say that because I think as entrepreneurs, sometimes you spend so much time, I spend more time, this is the reality. I don't go grocery shopping for home. I go grocery shopping for my office. That's what I do. I'm being honest. Like right now, there's food in my office, and there's none in my house right now. And I say this being someone who does spend a lot of time with clients and other things I have going on. So you know, the real advice. I mean, because that's the reality of it is. You know, people are trying to develop ideas, you know, meet people, show up to all these events, find a venture cap. I mean, like, you almost don't have time to sleep, right? And so when you do get to that point, stop, take a break. if you're walking away or taking a break for 3 days or a week, and the business isn't running, then that's something to think about as well. And that's if you have, you know, if you have a large clientele, or if you even have staff, but you're no good to anybody burnt out working on fumes. It just doesn't work that way. I'm sorry.
So I wanted to kind of dive in a little bit more into resilience when you talked about that as one of the sort of fundamental foundations of a founder that you're looking to invest in. Is that something that is necessarily, does that person just have it, or is that something that we can learn? And if so, how?
Yeah, I don't, if I really think about the definition of resilience, I think we know, but I don't, if I really like driving home after a long day and meeting with 6 different companies, you'd have to do more, like you were saying, where you spend so much time with them, because to assess resilience requires a continuum. And we make most of our decisions relatively snap. We don't spend months and months with these companies. We spend days or weeks with the company, and that's, I don't know, I think it's important, and I think I go on instinct, but I don't know, but I'm not sure it's rational. How do you know if somebody's resilient? If it's a multi-time founder, then you can kind of cheat and you can look at how they did in their other companies. But far more than half of the companies we look at, they're first-time founders, just because the law of averages. And I don't know how you're going to know. You ask them if they're resilient in some other aspect of their life, and they'll tell you a mountain climbing story, and great, but I don't know if that's really it. So I'm just looking for, I think honestly I'm looking for other attributes that I can identify that are correlated with resilience, but I think it's a very important attribute, but I just think it's so hard to assess unless you're the kind of investor. And if you're doing later stage investing, you might spend a year, you know, the Series A and certainly the Series B, they might start to get to know the company before they raise their A, and then they'll raise their A, and then they'll go out for their B round. So those investors might have spent a long time and have had a chance to find out in a binary way if the person is or is not resilient. But if you're catching them at the seed or pre-seed stage, they haven't had time. I mean, honestly, just the definition of resilience, they haven't had time to be or not be resilient. Or if they aren't resilient, that's really bad because it's such a short period of time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, no, I'll second that, but there are also ways, maybe resilience is not, there are also ways to, I think one thing that I do is I often go to an investor meeting with a founder that I will advise or I'm considering to advise or even invest in and see how they can stomach a no. That's a pretty good way to like judge character, the ability to take feedback, but also taking feedback without like losing sight of what you're trying to build. I'm always worried with founders who seem to listen to the last person who talked to them and agree with the last person who talked to them. But I'll give you an example. So one company that I'm advising right now, it's called Unest. Fantastic founder, Xenia, first-time founder. She's raising $2.5 million right now, closing the round. And I mean, she's going to build a financial, powerhouse. When I met her, so I met her and I took my time. She invited me to become an advisor, and I took my time to make my decision. But one thing that she told me that stuck was she was a pretty high-power executive in a financial firm. Decided to take her CFA, and I don't know if anyone is familiar with the CFA exam. Probably one of the most grueling exams that you can take in the financial world, and took it. So it's three exams. Taking it 1 year after, like in consecutive year is a feat, and she did it while giving birth to twins, and So I don't know if I judge resilience there, but telling me that story, I knew that she probably had it in her, right? I mean being a full-time, she had a full-time job, took the CFA exam, and give birth to twins. I said to myself, okay, I think that I don't know if it's resilience or not, but there's the attribute of a founder there. I mean some of the attribute of a founder there, and I'm not surprised that she went on to raise with some large funds in SF. And convinced almost everyone telling that story.
Do you think that it requires these types of challenges in sort of personal life in order for that to happen, or is there another way that other people build that resilience or can demonstrate that?
As I listen to your answer and I think about the question, I know where my head goes, and it goes to just crazy, there's a million cliches for it, but crazy hard working. Like, I'm trying to think of the example of a company that was in my office yesterday, really good founder, but if they hit, you never hit your numbers, but if this particular founder hit his numbers, it was just particularly unimpressive, like 3 years out, not even beginning to get to the vertical part of the hockey stick. So while I don't think I can really assess resilience, I can assess crazy hard working, and that means doing more in less time. And just looking at our economics, I have a fund. The faster I can return capital to my investors, it's not that we're jerks and we want you to get your exit unnaturally fast because we're jerks. It's because the faster we return money to our investors, the happier they are, and the more they then put in the next fund that we raise. So if you could do it in 4 years instead of 5 years, I want you to do it in 4 years instead of 5 years. You can do it in 3 years instead of 4 years, I want you to do it in 3 years instead of 4 years. So it's like substituting resilience for just what have you done that demonstrates that you're really good at execution and you're gonna just crush it. And you may, if this doesn't resonate with you, if this turns you off, that's really totally okay. You shouldn't think of venture capital, just because I have the microphone doesn't mean that you should be taking venture capital. The vast majority of businesses should never take venture capital. But as soon as you do take venture capital, you have to realize that there's an expectation that wouldn't come necessarily with friends and family investors or celebrity investors or angel investors or strategic investors. They have much different motivations. The minute you take a penny from a venture capitalist, you've got to just run insanely fast. And so it's substituting hard work for resilience. And then I think I can better assess it.
For me, I typically assess people's resilience based on life experiences, because the reality is that not everybody is on the equal playing field. And so for me, I'm interested in knowing about, which is why I ask the question, what did I do? So I'm interested in knowing about someone's personal life. Like, what are some of the challenges? You know, who are you as a person? Because again, if you're a first-time entrepreneur, you may not have the experience of running the business. And so I'm looking to find out more about things in your life that you've overcome, things that you're working through. And another way that I actually, it's funny because we were kind of having this conversation last week or this week. One of the ways that I assess people's resilience is actually through their level of awareness. And that may sound slightly odd, but for me, that lets me know, I mean, the reason why it works for me is because it lets me know that when you're having a tough time or something's going on, you have the ability to sort of step out of yourself and assess what's going on. And that way, you know, simply based off of that alone and how you can sort of frame your own experience lets me know how much energy you have into actually seeing the challenge through versus just saying, fuck it, I give up. Because it happens. It totally happens. I'm not sure if any of you in here have been in any other incubators or core spaces besides this particular space here. But it happens all the time. You have people who are really excited and they want to start these companies and they show up at core spaces. They get like the highest level of membership, buy all the desks, right? And they're there. And then 2 months later, they're gone, right? And so part of that is a matter of funding. But part of it is that they don't have the internal tools to actually develop the resilience. They haven't stuck with it enough long enough. And so what I find myself doing is actually vetting, because typically, you know, I vet the companies the people actually, I vet people, that's really what I do, to get a sense of that. Because to me, it's one of the most important things, especially if someone may not be able to articulate how they feel all the time. That alone is enough for me to know.
So my last question for all of you is, what is one piece of practical advice that you would like to leave the audience with today?
Lawyer
What
up.
am I gonna say?
Lawyer up. Be a lawyer.
What am I gonna say? Lawyer up. There you go. You know, honestly, it is coming to events like these. Knowledge is power. Learning what you need to do, and be humble enough to know that you don't know everything. Because honestly, I've learned so much just sitting here on the panel today from everyone. And so just know that you don't know everything, accept that, learn where you can, take constructive criticism and feedback, and have fun.
I don't know if I would say don't give up, don't get distracted, you know, forget the competition, and those are really like the wrong area of focus. Yeah, I mean, I think don't give up, don't get distracted, you know, and forget the competition. Those are the three things those are three things that I remind myself, you know, often.
So for those of you that are at my fund's stage, I mean, you're pre-seed or seed or maybe even all the way up to Series A, it's been an interesting learning for me as I've met with hundreds of companies in just the last 12 months. It's almost like, for a lot of them, I won't say all, but for a lot of them, it's almost like they got into entrepreneurship because they were told there'd be no math. You can't stop counting things and measuring things because you want to be an entrepreneur. And for a Series B investor, you're gonna hand them your financials, and they're gonna look at where you were 24 months ago and 12 months ago and what you're projecting into the future. And it's a Series B investor is making a much more sterile investment, more like a Wall Street analyst would look at a company. But a seed stage company, you maybe, for half of our companies, are pre-revenue. And the companies that are in revenue that we invested in are barely in revenue. So I don't get to go off of financial data. But there's lots of other things that you can and should be counting. You know, if you're doing a free pilot with just think of my world, if you're doing a free pilot with a hospital and how many minutes did the nurse interact with your software? Count minutes. Like, again, keep counting things, because at the end, you need to prove that there's some fit between your product and the market. The ultimate proof of that's going to come a year or two down the road with a P&L that shows revenue growth. But until you get to that point, you have to find surrogates for product market fit. And that means counting a lot of little things and then putting those on a piece of paper or putting those in a PowerPoint and sharing them. So think about what you can count, what you can measure. Don't just turn off Excel because you're an early stage company. Like, keep counting, keep measuring, keep doing a little bit of math, because we love that. And if you think about what might differentiate company X from company Y, if all things else are equal, the company that's counting the little beans and the little things that are demonstrating that you're on the right path. It's a pain in the ass to count them, and I know why you might not be, but figure out what's countable and count them every day, every week, every month, and report back. And if somebody like me talks to you at time 0 and then asks for a report back 30 days later because I'm not sure, the same things you introduced me to at time 0, show me how those metrics have grown 30 days later. Like, be that kind of anal retentive about the counting.
I'd say sort of 2 in 1, but the first half is develop yourself. I can't stress that enough, because sometimes you can have a really great product or great service, but man, your people still really fucking sucks, right? And so, but I say that, part joke, but very much honest. I say develop you. So be mindful that as you're developing this company or idea, your relationship with yourself is changing, and to become aware of that will, no doubt about it, become the gift that keeps on giving. Even if you find that the company is a flop, you are going to take you into the next adventure. It's just what it is, right? And the second thing, or the part B of that, I'd say find a community. And obviously, in co-work spaces, we have the privilege of having people who've elevated from the Starbucks, working there 9 hours a day, to being in co-work spaces like this. But I'd say even outside of here, right? So you want to, because obviously in spaces you're more connected to some than others. But I'd say develop a relationship outside of here. So like, if there's like a meetup group of like other founders or like, other people who are into what your company or idea is, I'd say connect with those folks, because sometimes, when you're on the cusp of like, saying the jig is up and tossing the towel, and even if it's just for like the day versus like the company in general, it's always sometimes like a word of encouragement from someone else that can literally sort of rejuvenate you in those moments. And so I find that those two things are the most important. Developing yourself, trust me, it's the gift that keeps on giving, and developing a network, like a serious network. Not just, it's social hour, and let's all get chips and drinks, right? Because who doesn't do that? But when you need to pick up the phone and be like, look, I've been up for 2 days, I am going nuts, and check me. Come give me some advice, give me some perspective. And so I think those two things are the most valuable, I would say. Sure.
So this is probably over-indexes a little bit for healthcare, because I do see a lot of dullish CEOs, and they're scientists, or they come out of the research world. They're not the charismatic person that you're kind of describing. And I all things equal, I'd love every CEO founder that comes into my office to be just commands a room and everything that Nick is talking about. But I will say that if you're a million miles away from that, I don't know, it's almost like a question for you. If you're a million miles away from that, like you said, know yourself. Like, you're not going to get there. So just sort of decide if you're going to be serious, introvert, smartest person in the room, but not the most charismatic. Be that profile, and that'll work for me, and be really good at that. Or be, kind of the charismatic, sales, extroverted person, and then be really good at that profile. But you don't want to be somewhere in between. You want to, and if you're too introverted, the message shouldn't be, work like crazy to turn yourself into somebody that you're not. The message should be, figure out who you are and get really good at being that person, because at the end of the day, we're going to appreciate that authenticity. And we funded a lot of people that stupid adage that, VCs invest in people they want to have a beer with. I invest in a lot of people that I will never have a beer with, I want to have a beer with, but they're genius, wicked smart, they know their space, they did something else in their career that gave them some insight into a problem in the healthcare industry, and you could translate that to any other industry, and that's why I'm investing in them. It doesn't matter that they're dull, they're just super smart, they see something nobody else in the industry sees, and then we've invested in people that I do want to have a beer with, and either way is okay, just be really good at either one of those people.
So let's open it up to questions. Does anybody have a question? And please, I'm going to preface this that this should be a question that should be for everybody. If you have any individual questions, you can approach the panel a little bit later.
Yeah, so maybe this is a loaded question, given we're going to meet, and you have a fund, is having raised a lot of money at A, B, and C before, new to me is this in-between round after friends and family. You guys all talked about getting to know the team a bit, or at least understanding the dynamics of that team, understanding resilience, or call it what you will, understanding how that interplay works. How in a first meeting, short period of time, do you go in and communicate how that team really works together? Because a lot of times, and again, maybe this is my lack of targeting going to angel syndicates, everybody wants to see that damn product. Everybody wants to see the, what your market numbers are and all these different things when, what should be celebrated isn't the IP. Because by the time if IP really matters in that upfront piece, it's because you're liquidating the company. How do you communicate that team? I hear that maybe you bring more than one person. I like that. How else do you get that across if that's your core?
Well, in your question, you said.
You don't mind?
In your question, you said first meeting. So I don't think the team. The first meeting is 30 to 45 minutes on average, 30 minutes for some VCs, 60 minutes for others, but you have 45 minutes. So you're not going to get a lot of opportunity. The goal of the first meeting is to get the second meeting. The second meeting can be more thoughtful, can be more team-oriented. So spend a little time on the slide, but it's such a superficial meeting that it almost shouldn't be the objective of the meeting. So two comments that are a little bit more practical. One, half of you guys come into my office and start the pitch by saying, Jay, tell me a little bit more about your fund. So dumb. Like 45 minutes and you want me to spend 5 minutes regurgitating what's on my website. Like, and every fund's the same way. Do not ask me about my fund. A, you just acknowledged that you haven't read my website. And B, we're going to waste 5 of your 45 minutes talking about my fund. And my fund isn't that interesting. It's just a bank account. Like, there's nothing there. Like, just don't do that. Like, go right into, you've got plenty of time to get to know my fund, and if it's a second meeting or a third meeting, you can kind of throw those in, but do not waste 5 minutes with me talking. Just go right into it. And one, now the real sort of more, less joking, maybe good idea for those of you that have teams, and this, I'll give credit to the company that did this. He volunteered, this is maybe meeting 3, so not the first meeting, and I had only met the founder CEO in meeting 1 and meeting 2. Meeting 3 was, Jay, do you want to attend our management team meeting? So he invited me, and there was a virtual company, they were spread out all over the country, but they did a Zoom call, say every Thursday at 10 o'clock. He had me join that Zoom call. So just as kind of a, and we funded him, by the way, so maybe part of the equation, but I got to see, I didn't understand what they were talking about because I didn't know the company that well, but I got to see how the 4 little squares on the computer screen were interacting with each other during a staff meeting. And it was like their weekly stand-up or whatever, and really interesting way of allowing me to see the the chemistry and the interaction, what they were wrestling with, and maybe they staged the crap out of it. Maybe, I mean, in fairness, maybe they all got together and said, don't bring up any of the bad stuff. But they did bring up bad stuff. They did have some sort of tension moments during that call. So I was inclined to think that it was a pretty authentic thing. But it's just it's an interesting thing to do for somebody like me who's looking for access to the company. What better access than let me be a fly on the wall during one of your operational meetings.
Thank you.
I want to know, what advice would you give? I'm a solo entrepreneur, so I do everything myself. I have my side hustles, essentially. I have a day job. What advice would you give me who is self-funding all of my projects before meeting with somebody like you guys?
Well, I guess it depends. What's the objective of the meeting?
Get money.
Well, I mean,
maybe get a partnership and get money. Find
one,
somebody.
one quick answer is that, and I think Jay should really be answering, but if you come to an investor and tell them that you're, running a company on the side with a full-time job, I mean, that's a pretty big red flag here, And I understand, like financial commitment. I mean, I used to work for a big company before I took the jump. But, I think that starting a meeting saying like, I have a full-time job and I'm doing this on the side or during the weekend or at nights. So yes, that would be my first, I would actually maybe advise you not to take a meeting unless this has been settled.
Yeah, I didn't know that. You don't have a side hustle. Repeat it after me. You do not have anything going on the side. It's the darkest red flag. I mean, again, it's just a competition, so I can like you, I can like the idea, I can even like your attraction. But oh yeah, I like 10 other companies and there's 4 people that are all in and they've maxed out their credit cards. You're just not gonna, with my fund, we did the math lately, you have an 8% chance of getting funded by my fund, looking at the number of companies that got a first meeting to getting a check written, that's how many we see. So now you're down to a 10th of 8%. Like, it's just, you can't have it.
So then let's say this is my main hustle, this is my job.
It's better.
Yes, there you go. What I do, I eat, sleep, and breathe this. What advice would you give a young solo entrepreneur who's never had a VC meeting before?
Start having VC meetings. I mean, it's, I answered this question earlier today with somebody and, have meetings. In particular, have meetings with VCs that you're not going to get money from because you're going to fail. But if I'm a good fund for you, don't talk to me early. Do a really bad job in front of 10 funds that you were never going to get money from anyway. You get to that point, and some people in the room may know that, where you get really good at pitching your company. And I don't think anybody's ever really good on pitch 1 or 2 or 3. You just got to get them out of your system. Probably something related to the entertainment industry where you just, your first take on anything's just not good. It just doesn't roll off your tongue. You don't seem as authoritative. You don't have the command of the subject matter. And then all of a sudden, nothing's changed, but 10 pitches later, you're just killing it in the room. And we sense that, and we're just, I don't think we should be, I mean, in full disclosure, I don't think we should optimize for somebody that's coming across authoritative, but as a human, I do optimize for founders that just seem like, even if they're wrong, they seem convincing. You have to score better on that dimension, all things equal. So, don't worry about, just get out and start practicing. Get out in front of, most VCs are good-ish people, and some aren't, but most will, I do it all the time, and I take lots of meetings that either I know going in I shouldn't, but I'm still willing to do it. I mean, we all kind of have a little bit of a help out the entrepreneur in this, because almost all VCs were you before we were, I mean, how many VCs are VCs right out of college? We all were you. Some couple cool things happened, and all of a sudden we had the credentials to be a VC, more or less. So there's a certain sympathy that we have for the situation that you're in. So take advantage of
I'd say, that's definitely jump back on that, that's really good. Find an advisor. Find an advisor, someone that can say, hey, these are some of the tools that you need if you're gonna sit in front of someone, and ask for money. And then again, I agree, I don't know the average of the number of people who pitch the first time and then receive funding, but the benefit of that actually is the fact that if you're someone who is resilient and you are aware and you're paying attention, you can say, oh, got it, everything, not everything, but most things or some things that they, had, they gave me feedback on, it's probably something I may need to tweak for the next one, right? So at this point, you're literally volleying against you and your company, and you're literally just using them for feedback. That way, when you do go for the third or fourth, whatever pitch it is, that you like fucking crush it. Because the whole point is that you, part of the game is like, how do these people think, right? And how can I, as authentic as my product or service is, communicate that to them in their leverage? Like, what are they looking for? What do they value? It's the benefit of going and seeing ZCs and being turned down is the fact that you get to understand what they're looking for, and that's a huge benefit right there.
And so the dirty little secret is what we care about is the next time out. So like, it's hard to think about, but I have to assume, like when you come to me and you're raising a $750,000 seed round, I'm actually not even asking myself the question, are you good for that? I'm asking if, when I put the 750 in and you run the company for another 9 to 18 months, the next round is kind of that big moment for the company. This is the nothing, I play in the nothing round. I can get you to the next round, but the next round you gotta go to Silicon Valley and you gotta raise $5 or $10 million. So really, this is the thing you have to be thinking about. Almost every professional investor is one chess move ahead. Not if you're good now, but will you get that company, will you get yourself Silicon Valley ready? Not to say you have to raise from Silicon Valley, but statistically, you might do your seed round with a fund down here, and because there aren't a lot of Series A, Series B funds, you're almost always getting on a Southwest plane and going up and raising in San Francisco or Silicon Valley. So I'm really asking myself, every time I'm interacting with you, I'm saying, not can she raise 750, but can she raise 5? And that's it's a whole different thing, but that's what I'm thinking, and that's what any professional, because it doesn't do me any good if you turn this 750 into a nice, cute company that just limps along for the next 20 years. It's my worst outcome. I want you to go out of business more than I want you to limp along. Because I don't want to have to be worried about you. You're never going to do me any good. So please go out of business in 7 years. Don't keep going. I want you to either go to Silicon Valley and raise a huge war chest and become a $100 million company, or gracefully bow out and then I can take the write-off. That's really that's the venture economics that I play with. So talk to me that way.
I think we have time for one more question.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wanted to know, like, in terms of for people who don't think they need venture capital, and these that don't need it, what advice would you give solopreneurs for scaling their business in terms of clients, and also in terms of like long-term hiring, for like contracting employees? Because everyone a lot seems to talk about venture capital and funding, but I don't feel like all businesses need funding.
Yeah, there's no television
But what's
show
like the
for
plan to
other
scale?
Silicon Valley on HBO for the other categories.
Yeah.
That's why I said earlier, like, most of you shouldn't, most
Yeah.
businesses shouldn't take venture capital, but that's like what gets celebrated, especially in California. You go anywhere else in the country, it's sort of a different, more sane thing. But here it's like it's a stripe if you get venture capital, and it shouldn't be, because it's not the right form of funding. But there's a lot of, there's angel investors, there's lots of, depending on what you're doing, there's lots of non-dilutive funding that's out there, grant type stuff.
But if we think that the business, we need money financially, like to live and not live in a shoebox, but to scale in terms of growing our business, what's the best advice you could give for just growing business client base and long-term hiring employees.
Are you saying without any investment or with investment that doesn't have venture capital in its name?
Without any investment.
Well, then your options are you grow organically. If you make $1 of revenue and there's 30 cents of profit, then you can put 30 cents back into the business. But there is non-dilutive, especially in the economy being what it is today. Probably a third of the companies that we've invested in got going with hundreds of thousands of dollars of money that came in that wasn't debt or equity. It was just usually the federal government having one grant or one program or another, and they wrote a document, they held their breath for 90 days, and they got some money. And so, again, it depends on what those tend to be more good for the world type businesses, but there's that whole way of getting money into the company that doesn't, and the beautiful part is you're not giving up an equity stake of the company. But I don't have any other.
I have a question for you after.
Great answer.
I'll piggyback on that. There's this term that says sales cures all, and I think you just have to turn into a goddamn animal, and you do, and you have to, you know, based on what your business or services that you're offering, you know, there shouldn't be a day that you're not out pitching your business to a new company. That's just kind of it. And as Jay said, you know, reinvest that money back into your business. That way you can then duplicate yourself, right?
And one other answer that popped in my mind as you said that is, in my world, my biggest competition in my last 12 months, but in the last few years, is not other VCs, but every hospital woke up and decided to have a venture fund. So, and every big company in every industry, more or less, started a venture fund because the economy, the stock market's been so good, they have lots of money on their balance sheet. So a lot of times, depending on I don't know anything about your business, but depending on your business and what industry it's in, you can go to the big fish in that industry who have started, they may not even call it a venture fund, but they're strategically investing in companies in their industry, and their criteria is a lot more focused on the strategic value of the investment, not the financial value. I can only get excited about the financial value because I have no strategic tentacles. But if you're, if you're a shoelace, if you're making shoelaces, and there's a big shoe company out there, they might take a chance on Whisker because they're thinking, oh, Whisker gets big, that could be good for me. Maybe I acquire them. Maybe I get to have a front row seat in how they're doing. So looking at strategic investors in your industry is another place that you might meet their requirements, whereas you might not meet the requirements of a VC or want to meet the